Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Man, we are 1 week away from the start of the NFL draft. It's like Christmas for guys like our next guest. Chris Trapasso, CBS Sports NFL Draft Analyst. Guy's been a good friend of the show and very generous with his time throughout the years. We appreciate him so much. Chris, welcome back, man. Thanks for the time. How are you?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Man, it's always our pleasure. The giant question here with the Saints at 14, everyone, it's sort of this consensus, like they're going to go tackle, right? But who's most likely to be there at 14, and what scenarios do you see that could potentially unfold for New Orleans there at 14?
Yeah, I think Olu Fashanu is the name I've probably sent in the most mock drafts to the Saints. I personally don't see why there seems to be a little bit of a reputation dip for him during the pre-draft process. I mean, he's plenty long enough. He's young. I thought his 2023 was pretty darn close to his 2022. He probably would have been a late first or an early second round pick last year, if not earlier than that. I think, though, Fuanga from Oregon State's going to probably go ahead of him. Maybe even Amarius Mims or J.C. Latham from Alabama. And then another scenario would maybe be that Brock Bowers is still on the board at 14. And I think just given what the Saints probably need to do to just add more weapons for Derek Carr, they would probably have to consider him. I mean, of course, it would depend on who else is still available, but those two seem to be, I don't want to say the two most likely scenarios, but it feels like they could be there and they would make sense for New Orleans with that 14th pick.
Let me come back to Bowers in a second, but I want to stay on the tackles. So I'm bullish on Fashanu. I think that would be a great pick. I would love it if it happened
Agreed.
that way. How do you rank or rate or grade the tackles that are, because right there's this consensus of like Joe Alt and then the three Fs, as everyone always says, Fuaga, Felice, Fashanu. You mentioned Mims in there as well, Latham. What's the pecking order for you? And maybe a better way to ask it, Chris, is how big of a gap and a differentiator is there among all those guys?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what we have to remember, and I'm just one opinion out there, but we have to, it's like when we get to this week of the draft for any position, we kind of get into this idea that wherever these players go off the board, if Joe Alt is the first tackle, he's going to be the best one. And if Amarius Mims is the second tackle off the board, he will ultimately be the second best. And that is hardly ever the case at any position. So for me, I think Fashanu is the best overall tackle in this class. I think the size, the length, the balance to his game, the pass protection that he showed. Yes, it was in the Big Ten. It wasn't in the SEC. But I think his potential is all pro caliber, and I don't think it's going to take him long to get there. After that, I have Fuanga. He's a little bigger. He's kind of that traditional, old-school, strong-side right tackle that can really maul against the run and was a pretty good pass protector at Oregon State. And then after that, I have J.C. Latham. I'm a little bit lower on Joe Alt. I think the size and the athleticism are there. I just saw him on film winning uglier than I expected. I thought it was going to be the cleanest film of any of these tackles, and I thought it was actually among the elite guys because there's no doubt that he's talented. A lot of recovery plays where he gets beaten and then uses his athleticism to still block the defensive lineman. I think that early on, as he gains strength in that 6'8" frame, could take him some more time than I think people are believing right now to acclimate to the NFL.
He's on Twitter at Chris Trapasso. Okay, so Bowers. If Bowers is there at 14, is he that much of a value proposition that it's like you got to take him and try to get a tackle later in the draft? Just because, and Chris, I maybe would comp it to like when the Saints took Lattimore. Maybe cornerback was their biggest need, but they were like, hell, he was top 5 on our board. He's sitting there at 11. Of course we're going to take that guy.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's not just with the draft like, hey, let's just grade these players and then pick whoever's our number 14 guy. We're picking at 14. Let's pick him. What you mentioned, being able to navigate and understand positional depth in the class, and I'm sure the Saints front office or scouting department knows it even better than I do. But yes, this offensive tackle class is loaded. It is I think, better than the wide receiver class in terms of just starter depth, complete players that you can get later in the draft. The tight ends are not very good. It's Brock Bowers. I like Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. There's a few names, and I won't be surprised if in 2 or 3 years there's one or two others that are ultimately solid players. But the cliff from Bowers, even down to Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, who's my tight end too, and Jaheim Bell from Florida State, who I think is a solid player, it's a big gap. The offensive tackles, yes, there are those blue chippers that we've been discussing, but there are guys like Roger Rosengarten. There's Patrick Paul from Houston. There's so many other names, second, third, fourth round, where I think we're going to look back and say, hey, it was actually smart of the Saints to just get the best tight end available, even if it's not the best financial decision when it comes to how much you're paying that guy on the rookie deal compared to top of the market deal. But then they were able to kind of swing around and get a Christian Jones from Texas or a Delmar Glaze from Maryland. There's just so many names. Even Nathan Thomas right there in your backyard from Louisiana Lafayette is a really good player who I think is going to be either a great tackle or maybe a Pro Bowl guard at the next level. So, yes, I agree. I think in that situation, you maybe go Bowers and then wait on tackle.
Do you think there are rookie starter offensive lineman opportunities at 45?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Okay.
I just named a few. I mean, certainly more than tight end and maybe some of the other needs. It kind of feels similar to teams are not going to be afraid to pick wide receivers at 45 and plug them in right away. And I think anyone that you bring on your show who's a draft analyst will at least agree that the offensive tackle class stacks up very closely to the wide receiver group. So if you're not afraid to plug in a wide receiver 2 or 3 with your second round pick, I certainly think in this class, and I already named a few who I think can be a second-round pick and can be the right tackle or even left tackle starter. Now, does that mean I think they're going to come in and be amazing instantly? Not necessarily, but I do think starter-capable offensive tackles available on the second day of the draft.
Chris, it helps the Saints that in this class, their two most gigantic glaring needs are tackle receiver, and these seem to be the two deepest positions in this draft. So play the hypothetical with me. If the Saints get a tackle, whomever it might be, at 14, realistically, what do you think is available for them there at receiver at 45, and what's maybe a best case for them?
Yeah, I think two names stick out to me would be Xavier Leggett from South Carolina, just someone that is big, physical, fast, ran a 4.39 at 220 pounds, 6'1". Not the greatest separator, but can take some of those shorter, maybe more conservative throws from Derek Carr, turn them into big games. That's what he did for Spencer Rattler last season at South Carolina. I know down in your area of the country, they certainly saw that in SEC country last year. Him and Troy Franklin from Oregon, totally different player, speedster, spindly, going to maybe deal with physicality from bigger, stronger corners in the NFL. But when he is given space, and if that can be manufactured for him, not that he's really a gadget guy, but if you can get him a clean release off the line with motion, and certainly last year we saw how the Dolphins really made that motioning at the snap kind of the newest league trend. You get him in those situations, he's going to run by a lot of cornerbacks in the NFL. I think he's faster than his 4.41 speed. Very fluid in and out of his breaks, and he tracks the football outstandingly deep. So I know that they have some weapons who can get down the field, but I think either one of those two on either end of the wide receiver spectrum in terms of what flavor you like would make a lot of sense for me if I was picking for the Saints at 45.
A couple more for you. Chris Trapasso is our guest, CBS Sports NFL Draft Analyst. No doubt it's the busy season, so we appreciate it. On Twitter, at Chris Trapasso. Be sure to give him a follow. Chris, as we've had this conversation around the Saints so much, the other notion is we all know the Saints don't have a 3 or a 4, but they are completely incapable of just being patient. So there's no chance that they just sit out until round 5 and then take 4 guys in round 5. Like, they're going to move up somewhere in round 3 or 4, and the most likely position that we talk about here is defensive tackle. So what is there at defensive tackle in round 3 or potentially round 4 that you think could present value for New Orleans when, because I'm not even saying if, Chris, when they move back into day 2 and take a player in round 3?
All right, so I just went with 2 opposite ends of the spectrum at wide receiver, and I'll do that for defensive tackle. How about Gabe Hall from Baylor, who's like 6'6", 290, 295. He's kind of that, I'm not going to call him J.J. Watt, but he's in that mold where he wants to win with a swim move, a swipe move. He's kind of a finesse player despite being as towering as he is. I think he's one of the better day 3 interior defensive linemen who's a pass rusher. He wants to win up the field and can, even though, he doesn't have that low center of gravity. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I'll keep it local. How about Mekhi Wingo? To just have that burst, to slip through gaps, to just be hard for offensive linemen to get their hands on him. They want to control his kind of smaller frame at the point of attack. He wins just with first step quickness, and certainly Saints and LSU fans know what type of player he can be just based on his athleticism alone. So we don't really know, and you guys probably have a better grasp than I do on what type of defensive tackle they want, but I do think rounds 4 through 5, 6, somewhere in that range, decent depth at the defensive tackle spot, and really would highlight those two, Gabe Hall and obviously the homegrown guy, Mekhi Wingo.
Because before you go, I got one more for you. I know you get this one a ton, but if there is, well, let me get 2 quickly. One, what do you think happens at the top of the draft with the quarterback?
Caleb Williams and then Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
Patriots, I've been asking around, and I'm not even going to say what I get because it's a different answer from every single source. They're going to pick May. They're going to trade back. They love McCarthy. So I don't really think anyone knows besides the people in that Patriots room right now.
You think Jaden goes to Washington?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the guy sleeper that every time you do mocks or you're asked about it, whatever round, whatever position, that you love in this draft that you just don't understand why this person isn't getting more pub?
I'll go with 2 quick ones, both on defense. Chop Robinson from Penn State. I do not get why it's like, maybe late first, early, mid-second. I think his burst bend was outstanding 2 straight years, really productive at Penn State. The pass rush moves kind of came alive a little bit down the stretch. Relatively young. There's some older rushers in this class, Verse and Latu, who I like, but they're like almost 2 years older than him. So Chop Robinson, and another one from the SEC, Chris Abrams-Drain from Missouri, that his teammate Ennis Rakestraw gets all the buzz, and he might be a second rounder. When I'm watching Ennis Rakestraw, and then even at the Combine, they measured in similarly, but Abrams-Drain was the one flying downhill, making tackles, great in zone, instincts, was really a sure tackler for being as small as he is against the Georgias and the LSU. So Chris Abrams-Drain, I think, is going to probably be a second or a third round pick if he clears medically with some teams, and he's going to be that kind of Mike Hilton, Trent McDuffie that's just going to be that pesky slot corner that's going to be a really good pro for a long time.
Had a chance to talk to him at SEC Media Days last summer in Nashville. Really impressive young guy, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Chris Trapasso, hey, man, you're the best. Thank you, as always, for a couple of minutes, man. I know it's a busy time. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.